What's up, guys? Welcome to the Walk On Warrior podcast, where we prepare young student athletes for next level success. I'm your host, Coach Z. And listen, I'm super excited for our guest on today. He is a former collegiate football coach, current principal, San Diego guy, as well as a parent going through the process of helping his young student athlete get to the next level. And without further ado, Mr. Chris Fore, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Coach Z, thanks for having me on, man. Really appreciate the time to talk recruiting with you. Appreciate everything you're doing to try to help kids get to that next level, man. There's nothing better than securing a 4-year degree, and kids who have football as a way to reach that means. I'm all about doing what we can to help those type of kids.
Absolutely. And hey, listen, let's dig right into it. Let's go into your coaching career. And because I know at the next level, of course, you had the experience of recruiting and seeing it from both ends now. But, of course, dealing with those young student athletes and their parents coming to you, and then you also recruiting them and the process and questions and things that they go through. And so let's talk about your career as a coach.
Yeah, Coach, before going into what a lot of those in education, they call it the dark side administration, entering this will be my 6th year as an administrator. So I last coached ball in 2017. So in some ways it feels like just yesterday, and in other ways it feels like a lifetime ago because so much has happened since then. Yeah. But coached for almost 2 decades. And, man, loved every minute of it. As you said, born and raised down there in San Diego County. Go Padres. And I started coaching my senior year of high school because, long story, but briefly, my playing career was ended between my sophomore and junior year. I was in an awful car accident. It broke every bone in my left leg. My junior year, I was in a wheelchair during the season, learning how to walk all over again as a 16, 17-year-old kid. And then my senior years, when I started coaching football, I coached our little freshmen. And that started a career for me that was awesome. Nothing better than coaching and having an impact on kids through this great game of football.
Yeah. Gosh, anybody that I talk to when they talk about freshman football, they say it is some of the most fun they ever have because they don't have to do anything on Fridays. They can come to the games, have fun, but also, really impact really young student athletes. But, they want to win, but they want to have fun just as much as anything. And so I think over the course of, a student athlete's life, they start to lose the fun of the game as well as coaches, right? It becomes so much of a business. So when you were a high school coach, did you dig into helping the young student athletes get prepared? So say they did decide, hey, I want to go play at the next level. And not only that, but what did you do if you did?
No, absolutely. I think part of that, the first step, Coach, is just having an awareness to be able to identify like what kids can play at that next level. There's a guy named Ted Johnson who graduated from Carlsbad High School down there. Ted ended up having a phenomenal NFL career I think spent most of his career with the Patriots, if I'm not wrong. He was a linebacker. Ted dated a friend of mine, a friend of mine's sister at Fallbrook High School back in the 90s, early 90s, a long time ago. Seems like forever ago, but Ted had freaking huge hands, right? And I remember when I met him, he was a senior in high school. I think we were freshmen. But I'll never forget how big his hands were. And fast forward years later, I'm coaching a kid named Eric who also had these huge hands, just big old hands. He was a linebacker. And his freshman year of high school, I said, dude, you are a special football player. You're going to play college football someday. And he was like, Coach, no, what are you talking about? No way that can happen, There's another kid, fast forward 2003, 2004 area. We had this I was now a head coach. We had an undersized kid, but probably among the best hands in close to 2 decades, the best hands I ever saw. Like this kid caught anything and everything. If he could reach it, he caught it. I mean, I'm not kidding. I barely saw that kid ever drop a football. So good that our varsity punt returner got the yips. You know what I mean? This one season, just it was in his head. He could not catch punts. And so I said, who's got the best hands in the program? Ryan does. Ryan was only a freshman. We brought him up to varsity just to catch punts. And all he did was fair catch punts, because halfway through the year, like, our punt return team just got so bad. We had no confidence in our punt returners, just being able to feel the dang thing. And so I told Ryan his sophomore year, dude, you're going to play college football someday. And he's like, oh, man, I'm not big enough. And I said to him the same thing I said to Eric. Now, Eric was a lot bigger. Eric ended up going on to Brown University, Ivy League. He had one offer coming out of Fallbrook High School, and that was to Brown. And Eric got a 4-year degree from Brown, you know. And that all I'm not bragging about myself, but all the coaches in general, again, having that awareness, that started with one coach having a vision to go, dude, you're going to play college football someday. How did I equivalent Eric's hands to Ted Johnson's hands? They were just both huge dudes, you know, but they could also move. And then Ryan, an undersized kid who I knew, like I said to him, I know you're undersized, but you are a physical athlete. You catch everything sent to you, and I'm going to do everything I can. And you're a great student. By the way, both of those kids, great students. I'll do everything I can to help you find a home, you know? Yeah. And Ryan ended up going to Azusa Pacific University. I knew the head coach up there. I called him one day. I said, dude, he doesn't look the part. He's a tiny kid, but trust me. And because he didn't look the part and have those physical attributes, they didn't offer him any kind of scholarship. But because of my relationship with the head coach, he said, hey, I trust you. They offered him a walk-on spot. Long story short, 4 years later, he's their leading receiver, and then ended up coaching for them because he had such a great career, such a great dude. They ended up inviting him to stay around to coach, you know, I think that's when they moved up into NCAA. So again, started with the vision of a coach knowing what that next level looks for, you know, and I've just been very passionate. I've got a picture on my wall here of a kid named Jashawn, because he grew up here in Hesperia, grew up, you know, single mom, pretty poor kid. And that's another kid I recognized. This kid can go play college football. And it's not going to, I think, Coach, you've seen it. So many people think college football, Ohio State, Miami, my team, my favorite team, the Hurricanes, USC, Washington. And, man, there's so many kids out there. They're never going to play that big-time Division I football. They're never going to go get an NIL bag. But, like, Ryan, like Jashawn on my board, another kid, Kyle. I talked to Kyle. He was a running back for me in 2012. Like, hey, man, you ever think about playing college football? He's like, oh, Coach, I'm not a college football kid. I said, no, there's a place for you to go play college football. And long story short, he earned a scholarship to go play college football in the Midwest at a school he had never heard of. And he loves that community so much. He's been there since he started there in 2013, and he's been in that community ever since. He'll never move back to California because he fell in love with that little college town. So I think there's a home for not everybody. I'm not going to say everybody. Some coaches say there's a home for everybody who plays high school football. That's not true, in my opinion. But there's a home for a lot of kids out there, especially if they want to do a little bit of work and go find a home. There's 100 schools in the Midwest who are dying for specifically California kids, because we have a lot of very good athletes in this state. Now, I know you probably got listeners all over, but there's a home for a lot of high school football players if they want to, you know, humble themselves and not expect to go play at Alabama.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about something I think that you brought up that is really, really important that we never talk about is how important it is that coaches and teachers planting seeds in these young kids of hope and a dream and a vision of going and doing something. I don't care how big you are or how small you are. If a kid is interested, I'm going to push them hard that direction. Now, it'll work itself out in most cases, right? If a kid's just not good enough or whatever. With this walk-on warrior thing, it's all about preparing the kids. Let's give you everything that you possibly can have, get you prepared from a knowledge standpoint, maybe go to a couple camps, showcases, maybe go on a, non-scholarship based, unofficial visit or whatever. Coaches will take anybody in certain situations to come by because they're always recruiting, and put yourself in a position to go and do it because, as we're speaking right now, there's 66 JCs out here in California that play football. And not only that, but, there's just plenty of opportunities. Of course, in LA, there's kids everywhere. But you have these kids that, they get to that point. We talked about it off camera. We're talking about, kids out there that really, want to play, but they don't have either the knowledge or people around them to plant that seed. And that's all it takes, man. And it takes a lot. But at the same time, it just takes one person like you or I or any of these coaches or teachers. I don't care I always tell coaches this. I'm like, I don't care if you played football in college. If you can plant that seed, all of a sudden now this kid goes and plays football, comes back, and is like, listen, look where I'm at now. You didn't even play, but you motivated me and inspired me to go and play. And I think that's a really, And of course, a lot of the stories that you're just mentioning, there's some kids that didn't think anything of it, or maybe they did, but they're like, nah, that's not for me because I'm not big. I'm not what all this stuff. And that's the good thing about junior college and small college football. You develop.
Yeah. You're right. It is all about planting that seed, and as educators, as coaches, for those coaches listening, I think that's a huge part of it is being able to identify like what kid do I plant that seed in, and then how can I help them get there? There's another kid I just thought of. He went to be a kicker at University of Hawaii, and he had to do what's on your screen here, a walk-on. And so I recruited him from our soccer team at Linfield Christian in Temecula, where I was the head coach. He didn't play football his freshman year. Then we recruited him. We needed a kicker. I literally went out to the soccer, watched soccer, saw this kid. He was a goalie. Saw him kick one soccer ball as a drop kick a soccer ball. And I was like, that's my guy. I'm going to go after him. Took months and months of talking to him and his dad. Finally, they came out just to kick some footballs one day with me all alone after school. And coach, I'm telling you, I saw him kick the first time he kicked the football. I said to his dad, this kid's going to go play college football. And he rolls his eyes and he's like, oh, everybody says that. I'm sure you're just saying that for him to get to come out here. But at the end of the day, he kicked in the freaking Sugar Bowl, for the University of Hawaii. So I was right. Now, he didn't have, he had to walk on, but he walked down at the University of Hawaii. That's the only school that was interested. And then he earned a scholarship, for 3 years over there. Became a very, very big. He was during those teams with June Jones and Colt Brennan. If you remember those very, very good Hawaii teams, he kind of became a cult figure. They named him the Iceman because he won a couple games late in the game on a last-second field goal, and it was really neat to watch his career. But again, it's being able for a coach to know what that next level is looking for, plant that seed, and then help them get there. And I think you're right about I'm long-winded sometimes, Coach. I apologize,
Keep
but
going.
what you're saying about JC, one of the things I've seen here is the last 2 years with the transfer portal and my conversations with college coaches, colleges who used to take, for instance, 10 to 12 linemen are now taking like 10 to 12 linemen out of a senior class are now taking 3 or 4 high school linemen. They're going to the portal for the other 7 or 8. Because if I'm at Idaho State, do I trust a transfer lineman who's been at the Division I level for 1 or 2 years, or do I trust a high school kid who's unproven? right? So that transfer portal, and I'm sure, you know, you're in the business now more than I am, but I'm sure you could speak to that a lot more. That has really, I would say, ruined a lot of high school kids' chances to where now they have to go either smaller schools or go to a JC and hope to propel, you know, their stock at that JC level. And boy, California is filled with some dynamite JCs for them to experience.
Yeah. And I always mention this too, you know, we look at kids don't know this. And, you know, when I go speak to the schools, I make sure and go over this specifically. You know, at the Division I level, you only have 85 scholarships. That's not new scholarships. That's total, right? So that makes it even tighter to try to get a scholarship there. And so when we're dealing with these young student athletes, because anybody, oh my God, it drives me crazy. Every time I go and I meet with these kids, I'm like, okay, so what's your plans? I'm going Division I, coach. I'm D1 bound, hashtag D1, whatever. And the first question I ask these kids before I even start my presentation is how good are you? Question mark.
Yep.
And that goes really deep in my opinion, because you will miss out on a lot of opportunities by not answering that question and being truthful and realistic about it, because there's a lot of politics to go into this Division I level, right? Even when you go to 1AA or what is it, FCS, there's only 63. And it gets lower and lower and lower. In Division III, there are none. So with that being the case, there's a lot of turnover at those lower levels. And there's a lot of real good football that's played at those lower levels. But you ask yourself, how good are you? If Azusa, which RIP Azusa, you know, a school Division II, all these different schools, if they're coming to you and they're interested in you, you never tell them no. You make it seem like you're going there because they'll always come back. But you know, the opportunities are limited, and you tell a school, which I have a kid, I won't name names, but, you know, a friend of mine, his son made the mistake of, well, he's too good for an NAIA school, Southern Oregon, which Southern Oregon plays good football, man.
Yeah.
And so anyway, with that said, I mean, it's like, don't say no, kids.
Yeah, I had the same story, Coach. I had a kid one time. I won't say names or years, you know, but again, I called Victor Santa Cruz, head football coach at APU, and I said, "Listen, man, I got another kid for you." Now, this was 7 or 8 years after the Ryan kid I told you about, and I said, you know, here's his dimensions. He's, you know, and a thing coaches always ask, what offers does he have? And I said, Coach, he has none, but if you trust me. If he came to your school, I'm telling you right now, he's going to be a difference maker. He's better than that Ryan kid. He's not going to leave the field offensively for you. He's a stud, and he's under the radar because he's a couple inches too short and a couple pounds too light for a big scholarship. And I said, but trust me, you want to see this kid. And he said, all right, send me his tape, Chris, you know. And so I did. And, Coach, I'm not lying to you on how this went down. The very next day, him and his offensive coordinator were at our practice, and they offered him a scholarship right there, right? Yeah. So what happened, though, was he had another dude in his ear, right, a street agent. No, man, that's Pacific. That's Division II. That's trash. You're going to get bigger and better. So he did. He denied Azusa, one of his biggest regrets in life, because I'm pretty close to him. Ended up going, I think, 3 different JCs, maybe 2. And then it might have been just 2 different JCs, and then ended up playing for a very good friend of mine who's a head coach at an NAIA school. So here's a Division II offer, turns down his senior year because he has a 7-on-7 guy in his ear. That's trash. Division II is trash. You're a Division I kid. Nothing else comes up, Coach. No other offer. Graduates. Goes to JC, doesn't work out, goes to another JC, has a good time, and then comes back to old Coach Fore, help me out. Zeus is now off the table, right? And then he goes and plays, you know, at the NAIA level and had a phenomenal career, as I knew he would, but it just killed me that he said no to, you know, Azusa and a great opportunity at a Division II scholarship.
Yeah. So for the viewers at home, young student athletes, and hopefully parents as well, Explain what a street agent is.
A street agent is the bane of my existence. When I say street agent, look, there's some street agents that do a good job, but a lot of them are just in it for themselves. And when I say street agent, I mean they're not an educator, they're not a teacher, and that's okay because there's a lot of great walk-on high school football coaches. I've had a lot of walk-on guys, meaning they're a firefighter, they're a plumber, they're an engineer, and they then come to coach football, right? There's a lot of good guys like that. So you don't have to be a teacher to be a good football coach. Don't get me wrong, but they're not working in the educational system, and they're not even, most of the time nowadays, they're not even working on a high school staff. They were on a high school staff before, maybe on a JUCO staff before. They've gone their own route, developed their own 7-on-7 program. They're, a lot of times they are very well connected to colleges. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But they're charging kids money. Here's what's happening, Coach. Here's exactly what's happening, because I talk to parents and kids all the time about this stuff. These street agents, I call them, they're charging kids money for offers. Hey, come into my 7-on-7 group. I will get you offers. You need to pay. I've heard upwards. I can't verify upwards of $7,000 or $8,000, but I can verify. I do know. I've talked to parents who have been charged $2,000 for an offer. Right. Yeah. So this street agent says, if I get you an offer, you need to pay me $2,000. All that street agent is doing, they're breaking off $500 to their guy working at XYZ college, university, who's in the personnel department, who's giving a fake offer. Literally, it's not a committable offer. It's not a real offer. But they're getting this offer to go play college football. And there's listeners and viewers who are thinking, oh, there's no way that happens. You're full of crap. It's happening all the time. About 4 years ago, and I'll keep names out of it, but about 4 years ago, there was these 4 8th grade kids who got a Division I offer to a very big school through their street agent. And I called them out on Twitter and about how this is just fake and this is nonsense and this is ridiculous, where the recruiting game is these days. About 15 minutes after I put that out on Twitter, I didn't even tag the school, but one of the coaches, legitimate coaches at that Division I school, called me. No clue how he got my phone number, but he asked me to take my tweet down and said, look, we've already dealt with this. The head coach would appreciate if you took that down. It's making us look bad. And I said, is it true that your player personnel guy gave these 4 kids an offer via Zoom? And he goes, yeah, Chris, that really happened, but it's not a committable offer. It's not a real offer. And I said, then no, I'm not going to take that tweet down. People need to call out this bull crap so that kids and parents are educated on it. And they were fired up, but if you're caring about a tweet from Chris Fore, you got a lot bigger issues on your plate, in my opinion, to fix within your own staff. So pound sand. That was kind of my message to them, to be honest.
Well, on top of what you were mentioning, something that also really stood out to me is you're talking about an influence of a coach or influence of a mentor per se. I want you to dig into that and how important that is, because, you know, the reputation that let me rephrase that. The relationship you have with your coaches. It's another part of my presentation, my seminars. We talk about relationship with coaches. You're not going to have a good relationship with all your coaches. There's always going to be some coach that's in it for themselves or however they want to spin it. But when recruiting, when you're dealing with a head coach, because you just mentioned just a minute ago, right? You were talking to some coaches, head coach over at APU, and how that can make a difference, right? Building relationships. But like I said, you're not going to always win them over, because coaches are coaches and everybody's got their own emotions and, what they're in it for. But I want you to talk about the importance of having a good relationship with your coaches and, most importantly, your head coach when it comes to this recruiting process.
Yeah, you mean the head high school coach? Is that what you mean?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. No, listen, here's what's happening a lot of times out there is a talented athlete is getting poached by another high school or by that street agent. He's coming into, let's use my alma mater, Fallbrook High School. Okay, go Warriors. You get a really talented, let's say, wide receiver at Fallbrook High School. And let's say you've got let's say you've got Pacific Breeze High School. Okay. Pacific Breeze High School is 30 minutes away, and they really want that receiver. Well, they're going to send one of their little street agents, a kid not on staff at Pacific Breeze, but helps Pacific Breeze get schools. That Pacific Breeze coach reaches out to that Fallbrook High School wide receiver. He's like, hey, how many offers do you have? Well, none yet. Well, hey, if you come over here at Pacific Breeze, I'll help you get offers, man. Your coaches at Fallbrook, they don't know what they're doing. That's what they say. Well, legitimately, he might not have offers because he's 5'11". He's not 6'3" or 6'4" like those colleges want their wide receiver to be. He doesn't have that exposure yet, maybe because he hasn't created that for himself. So there's a long list of reasons he doesn't have those offers. But number one is that relationship with the head coach. A lot of times these kids and the parents, I'll just be frank, I'll use maybe a principal shouldn't use the word, but they're pissing on that relationship with their high school head coach because before you know it, they're transferring out of the school without any communication with that his Fallbrook High head coach. He's just going over to Pacific now because they promised them things that are unrealistic. And folks, listen, that word gets out to the college coaches that you don't have that relationship with that high school coach. You haven't tried to have that relationship with that head high school coach, that you bailed out of school without even telling them. So that coaching community is very important. But unfortunately, that's what's happened a lot of times these days is those relationships with your head coach get strained because they think, oh, my kid's getting screwed, right? And so they leave somewhere else. It's a real shame, but there's nobody like your head coach who's going to be able to help educate you. Now, I should back up a little bit. Usually that's the case. I mean, I'm not going to defend every head coach because there's some head coaches out there who don't do a good job with recruiting. There's some head coaches out there who don't see that that's their role, and I think that's absolute bananas. If you're a head coach for the right reasons, and that's the kids, you are going to play an active part in helping them get recruited.
Yeah. Well, the reason I bring that up is because as a recruiter at the next level, there's a process, right? So I'll email coaches, I'll call coaches, I'll DM coaches, I'll do all these different things to get in contact with coaches, especially these locals. And you would be shocked, Coach, at how many coaches don't even respond via email. And when they do respond, they don't even give me much information. Obviously, I'm not going to name names, but some of the local coaches, they'll just text me names. They don't give me anything else. It's like, I understand, you can't do everything. But when I see a coach from a real successful team versus a non-successful team, I know the difference.
Yep.
Because they'll send me an entire spreadsheet with his information on there, contact information, all the kids' contact information. I'm not expecting Twitter and all that stuff, but just give me the basics because that actually tells me how much you care about your kids.
Yeah. Yep.
I'll also, when I'm looking at those spreadsheets, I'll see coaches that have 1 and 2 years in advance kids that may potentially be, prospects because everybody wins at the end of the day. And like I said, I mean, for you young student athletes paying attention and watching this and viewing this, you're probably on the fence, right? You're a kid that's just not sure. Well, I'm undersized, but I'm here to tell you that if you have a good relationship with your coach, that can be the deciding factor on something, whether it's a walk-on position, partial scholarship, it could be just any opportunity whatsoever. And by the way, we're talking about portal, how late these kids get opportunities. It's incredible. And I should change it from walk-on warrior to like spring semester warrior because the amount of kids that I run into in the spring that are like, Coach, I'm not getting anything. It's March, April, May. I'm like, just we're still in contact with coaches. You still need to be in contact with coaches. I promise you, after that second exit meeting, there's going to be opportunities because we're talking portal. These kids are walking into the office saying, "Hey, Nick Saban, how much can I get?" And they're third and fourth string guys, and boom, they're bailing out. I'm not saying go to Bama or whatever, but I'm just saying at all levels, that's that kind of situation. And you really want to have that good relationship with the head coach. Now, I will say when he gets late into a recruiting like that, head coach is kind of moving on, kind of. So with that said, you have already should be at this point dialed in most of what you're doing and still trying to, follow up with coaches and go from there. I can give you a list of names of coaches in the Midwest, especially. We were talking about that. The state of Iowa's got unlimited amounts of NAIA D2s, D3s, Minnesota, everywhere. It's just, I won't go off on a tangent, but it's all about the opportunity. And if you build a good relationship with your head coach, those opportunities will probably be there because those coaches are always recruiting, especially late.
That's a good point. You look at like Ryan, who went to Zusa, Kyle, I told you about, went to Avila University, Jashawn, like those are just 3 kids. There's dozens and dozens I've helped over the years. If those weren't like, I knew and I identified you can go play at college. If those were knuckleheads, I'm not putting my name on them as a head coach and as a school. If they're knuckleheads, if they're not taking care of business in the classroom, now not one of those guys was a 4.0 kid. I'm not expecting that, but they did their best in the classroom. They did their best in the hallways. They kept out of trouble. If they're not that type of kid, I'm not going to bat for them. You know what I mean? So that's very important aspect of a student. Remember that phrase athlete, right? Or that phrase student. That phrase student comes before that phrase athlete. Yeah. So that's a very important piece. And the flip side, Coach, I've had some talented kids who, to be very, very frank and very honest, I had a kid, I won't say the name of the school, but I had a kid walk on to a Division I school. Now, he got an invitation to walk on without any of my doing because I would not vouch. I didn't help him at all. I'll just be honest. And I said earlier, if you're a head high school coach, you're not helping kids, that's ridiculous. But there's certain kids I have not helped over the years because they're just I don't know what you want to call them, but they're not a kid I would let my daughter date or you know what I mean? Like, they're not a kid I would want and invite into my own home because of the stupid things they've done on campus and off campus. And I'm not going to promote that type of kid, Now, at that school he was invited to walk on. I was not shocked at all when I ran into his father on my campus because he had a sibling at our school. No, it didn't work out. He was only up there for about 3 weeks, and they kicked him out of the program.
Yeah,
I wasn't surprised at all. Another school who invited a kid to come to on a recruiting trip, an unofficial recruiting trip of mine. A kid I did not promote or help because he was an absolute knucklehead. This staff never even reached out. This blew me away, Coach. He goes on a recruiting trip. An unofficial trip, right? But the staff never asked one question of me as the head coach or anybody on our staff. Never talked to anybody on our staff. And all of a sudden, this kid's telling me, "Oh, guess where I'm going this weekend?" And I was like shocked. But here's what happened: Monday morning, the head coach at this school calls me, and he's going off on me. What kind of kids are you sending us? Blah blah blah. And I said, "Coach, what are you talking about?" Because he got in a fight on the recruiting trip at a basketball game. And I'm like, "Coach," I said, "stop." And this is a very well-respected head coach. And I said, "Stop." I said, "First of all, I've never met you. I know who you are, obviously." And I said, "Don't talk to me like that." And Coach, not one person from your staff has talked to anybody on my staff or at my school. And he goes, "No, that's wrong." But at the end of the day, Coach, he had an assistant lie to him that he had vetted this kid out with our staff, that he saw a transcript from my high school he never had. Yeah. So that was this recruiting game is wild. The recruiting game gets very wild, but I don't know how we got off on that tangent, but that relationship with your head coach is very important. It's very important to do the right things on campus, be a good citizen, as I always told my teams.
Yeah. So when we're dealing with making things easier on a recruit going from high school, we'll say, to potentially being a next level student athlete, what you're going to encounter is of course, coaches coming on your high school to visit, get to know you. If you're lucky enough, you end up getting that, whether it's, a verb, those on-campus visits, however you want to put it. What would be some questions, or what are some non-negotiables? How about that you would tell your son to pay attention? Because when you're going through this process too, right? There's certain things that you're telling your son that there's non-negotiables through this whole thing, whether it's academics, the style of, the off-season program, or the whatever it is that this school has to provide. You have to have a non-negotiable, right? So what are some things that you would look out for, or questions to ask yourself for a young student athlete going through the process?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. As you said, my son, he's class of 25, so he's going in here. We're recording this here in July of 24, so he's got one more season left. He plays offensive line up here at Apple Valley High School. Big kid at 6'3", almost 250 here. Not big enough for a big school, but he's been a part of the recruiting process on his campus, meeting college coaches. A lot of coaches this spring who came through campus wanted to see him, talk to him in person, and some of the things I've talked to him about. You're looking. One of the number one things is, what kind of education are they gonna provide for you? And that's one of the things I've talked to kids about all through the years. Okay, great. UCLA offered you a scholarship, but you want to major in fire science. Do they have a fire science program there? Yeah. Kids and their parents, especially these days, they get so caught up, I think, in offers to go be able to create a social media graphic that they don't even think, can this university help me get to my next stage in life? Yeah. If you're going out to, I don't know, Kansas Wesleyan, which is an NAIA program, you think, oh, that's not a big deal. That's a little school. But boy, they've got a phenomenal program to help educate teachers, and they've got a dynamite teaching program. That might be a better offer for you in the long run, get you to your goals, than New Mexico State, who doesn't have a program for teachers. And I'm just throwing out two different schools. I don't know anything about their programs, but that's the number one thing that recruits really need to look at. And I've taught recruits and their parents is, what do you want to major in? And does this school have that major? That's the number one thing you need to look at, in my opinion. It's not about that football aspect as much as it is, what kind of education are you going to get out of it?
Yeah. Well, you're going to get yourself in trouble when you're focusing so much on the glitz and glamour of being on the field and so on. And you're 100% right. And I always talk about this, is that it's the country club mentality, right? You have parents that are more interested, and a lot of times they're parents that weren't able to cut it, like a dad that couldn't make it to the next level and he's working through his kid. Yeah. Well, it's the country club mentality. I want my kid to go here because I want my kid to go there. I think, and in my presentation, we talk a lot about the parents' role in this whole thing. And I think it's really important that the parents are off to the side, maybe just kind of, giving you a couple pieces of whatever. You're not writing the emails for them. You're not doing any of that for them. When you go on those visits, the kid's the one asking the questions, shaking the hands and so on. Because a lot of parents, they can create a bad situation. Because think about it, like if you're a coach like you were at the next level, you don't want to deal with parents.
No.
It's the last thing you want to deal with, because you've got so much going on, from recruiting, keeping kids eligible, or talking to counselors and grades. And student athletes, listen, understand there's a lot that goes on at the next level. and there's a lot of moving parts. Coaches want to coach. They do want to help develop you. They develop you as best as they can as a young man, hopefully into a man, but also on the field. You put that together, and then you have a good experience, hopefully. But it's like the last thing I want to deal with is parents. And so that's why I think it's really important to go into this, having some kind of a checklist. Shout out Keenan Howery, who played for Oregon ways back. We were talking about that, and him and his dad put a spreadsheet together. Like, they really dug into this thing. Spreadsheet of schools that are interested in him, schools that have the right academics. He wanted to play right away, which is kind of a tough thing to ask,
Yeah.
especially when you come in at that highest level. But that's the thing you got to ask coaches. What do you got coming back in my position? Am I going to have a chance to play? Am I going to hold pads? Am I going to redshirt? Those are really important things. But like you mentioned, the most important things are always academics first, because that is your foundation. If student athletes, I got news for you, newsflash. If you're not eligible at the next level, you can't play. So the whole idea is to play. So start with the student part of it and then get into the athletic side of it. But be prepared, ask questions. You got me, you got Coach Chris. You got a lot of resources online, but you have to be prepared. And that's, that's a main key. And so I want to dig in a little bit more to academics, because you're in academia currently. And I was going over the other day about the NCAA clearinghouse and how important that is. So when I have a kid come to me and ask me, okay, coach, so where do I start? So the first thing is obviously you need to make sure your academics are good. Go to the counselor, look at your transcript, core classes, all that kind of good stuff. Second thing is clearinghouse. And most kids don't know about what the NCAA clearinghouse is.
Yep.
And I won't ramble on too much, but this is an important and a key point with academics, is that when you go to NCAA clearinghouse.com, or it's the eligibility center, I think that's what they call it now. You go on there, you put all your academics, SAT, ACT, GPA, all that good stuff. The reason you do that is they want to make sure that you got your amateur status, and B, they want to make sure that, if academically you're not ready to go, these coaches can't truly offer you anything, verbally offer you anything they want. That don't mean nothing. But making sure that when the time comes, they're always going to say transcript. When I have my shirts, Coach Fore, I'm going to send you one. It's going to say Walk On Warrior, like you have on the top of the thing here. Right. On the back, it's going to say hashtag transcripts don't lie.
Yep.
Because you ain't getting nothing without a good transcript. And so that NCAA clearinghouse breaks it down for you. And the last thing I will say, when I talked to shout out Coach Cesar Rivas, he was talking about making sure that they have all that information when they're going through with emails, social media. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I wanted you to go into a little bit more detail about academics and how important that is for a student athlete as a high schooler, kind of building up into being a collegiate student athlete.
Yeah, no, that GPA and that transcript is going to help you earn money, especially if you're not a big time recruit. And look, such a very few percentage of kids are big time Division I recruits. There's one Division I. I've always said this. There's one Division I, and then there's 4 divisions below that.
Yeah.
So what that means is there's 4 times the chance to go play college football outside of Division I, right? You got 2, 3, NAI, and JUCO. And so, again, there's 4 times the chances to go play college football outside of Division I when you really think about it. Not a lot of people put it that way, but that's what makes sense. And you're going to put yourself in a great position if you have good grades. And that's my son, as I said, one of the first things when we talked after his sophomore year about, hey, is this something you want to pursue? Because you have to want to go play college football. I can't do that for you. And we had a really long talk one night, and he said yes. And so that's the first thing we did. We went on to the clearinghouse and got him a clearinghouse number, because that's what's real important. Like you said, those college coaches, you can be a dynamite athlete, but if you're not on the clearinghouse, you're not even recruitable. And so you got to get yourself on there. One of the first steps once you identify you want to play, or a coach has identified that you want to play or you can play, go get on the clearinghouse. Coach Z can help you go through that whole process. But get that clearinghouse number so that now you could put that on your Twitter profile or in your emails to colleges. And now, that's just one very important check mark to get off the to-do list, so to speak. And then make sure to have good grades. A lot of folks think those grades don't matter, but they really are going to matter, especially if you're not even if you are a top Division I, you're going to get 12 offers to go play big time college football. Let's be honest, your grades aren't going to matter as much. But I've seen kids lose Division I scholarships because of how they did their senior year, that they pissed away an opportunity for a scholarship because they didn't have the bare minimum GPA. And then another thing, Coach, because I've seen a local kid go through this recently, where he trusted his counselors too much, and he was not going to be NCAA a qualifier if he followed their path because of the A to G prerequisites you got to make sure to follow. So he had to enroll in a summer school class this summer to get kind of caught up, which, again, you would think high school counselors are all good to go there. They're not always. So that's another thing. Players, students, make sure to talk to your high school coaches. Don't just trust that that counselors put you on the right path. And I hate to say that as a principal, but sometimes the counselors don't understand. There's a school out here where I started up here in the high desert. I started coaching there in 2014, Oak Hills High School. They have an NCAA counselor where if the coaching staff believes you're a next level kid, they'll get you hooked up with that counselor who is an expert on going into NCAA schools. Not all schools have that. That's a great thing. That's a very strong school academically and athletically. You've got some counselors out there who have no clue what it means to go on to NCAA. That's a real important piece of this.
Yeah. So I don't want to brush past this because you mentioned qualifier, and a lot of kids probably don't know what that means, but NCAA qualifier. So we'll clip this out, but what is an NCAA qualifier? So basically what happens is you go to the NCAA clearinghouse and you fill out all the information, and that, like we mentioned, it determines whether or not, you're going to get that scholarship or not, and you're at amateur status, but also it'll determine whether or not you're considered a qualifier. And what that means is that, if you end up not going, say, to an NCAA or NAIA school, you end up going to a JC, which means if you go to a JC and you're a qualifier, you can get out after one season of going there. So usually what happens with that is a lot of kids are just undersized. It's not an academic thing, just undersized, and you're not getting that heavy recruitment, or you're getting heavy recruitment. They tell you, you've got a ton of speed, just go get bigger, go to the school, play one season, and then we'll bring you in, or however you want to put it. We had a kid when I was at Cathedral Catholic, shout out. We had a kid that his grades were just kind of right on the edge. We weren't sure, and so he had to go JC for 1 year, went to Riverside, ended up getting out after a year and went to University of Utah. It's not the most common thing. And I don't really push kids to be a qualifier per se, because, if you are, that's great. And you want to get out, it's great. And it happens. It works well. I never tell guys not to leave. But a lot of guys aren't prepared. The JUCO level, those 18 months, those 2 seasons, it's important to get developed, right? And just be patient. There's 2 things I could always tell young student athletes. There's 2 things, 2 words, the power of no and being patient, because you jump into this thing like you know what you're doing and you really don't, and you get yourself in trouble and it creates a bad situation. But I wanted to ask you, this is something that just came up to me, and I think this is a really important point. You're the perfect guy to ask. When is too early to decide, hey, I want to go and play at the next level and go through this whole process of going to camps and 7-on-7s and showcases and talking to coaches and baby Gronk and all? When is too early? When is too early? Because parents, listen up, because you're the reason. I'm telling you, when a kid's a freshman that decides to, go crazy and have Lane Kiffin offer him something. You know what I'm saying? So what would you say is too early to push into this whole recruiting scene?
A lot of people won't like my answer, but I think too early. My answer to your question, after almost 2 decades of doing this, too early is anything before the end of your freshman year of playing football. You've got to go play a whole year of high school football before you know, number one, do I like tackle football at the high school level? Because it's way different than tackle football at the junior or Pop Warner, junior All-American, whatever you want to call it level. It's just a whole new game. So question one, do I even like football after this first year of playing high school football to pursue it? And then question two, am I good enough? Like if now, there's a story is Michael Jordan got cut from his sophomore year and then, became, I think he's the best basketball player ever. That's a whole nother podcast. So yes, you do have those stories, folks. Those are few and far between. But if you're not starting on your freshman football team, and again, there's all kinds of stories. Tom Brady, I think he didn't start on his freshman team. From what I've heard, that's few and far between. It really is. But if you're not starting on your freshman football team, there's a very, very good chance either you're undersized because you haven't hit puberty yet, and then maybe that'll come, or you're just not good enough. And if you can't beat out the other freshmen on your team, there's a very good chance you're not going to be able to go past the high school level. I mean, that's just the frank, honest truth. Yeah. I would say don't stop pursuing it. Like if answer to your first one, if you go play freshman football and you absolutely loved it and you're a freaking workaholic in regards to football and you're passionate about it, but you weren't a starter, keep pursuing the heck out of it. I don't want to discourage kids, but at the end of that sophomore year, if now you've gone through half of your high school career and you still haven't earned a starting spot, you're probably not going to go play college football. That's just how it is.
Well, there's just a lot that goes on from a 13-year-old mentality, physicality, whatever, all the way to where you're a senior in high school. And I'm a big believer in teammates, being a good teammate, learning that aspect of development, being social with your teammates, building bonds, building relationships. Because if you can't learn that through a process of high school, junior varsity, or some have freshman team, JV, whatever, you're not going to make it happen in college because there's way more distractions. There's way more going on. So think of it like this, viewers. In high school, you're around the same guys for those 4 years, for the most part, right? But then when you get out of high school, then you're around a whole new, just from everywhere, right? And you're not going to click with everybody. But you can do yourself a favor in high school and click with everybody or do your best. Get close to almost everybody. And those are tight bonds, man. And if you want to win, you got to have a good team. You got to have good teammates. You got to trust each other. But there's a lot of development that goes on. And I think that we bypass that and it becomes so much about you, or not about you, but about me. And we lose that. And I think the coaches, when they come to watch you, especially in person, it'll show, right? There's things that coaches are looking for. Obviously, if they're coming to your games and watching you, they know everything about you other than, who you are on the field in between plays, timeouts, little things like that. And your personality will definitely come out in that aspect. And that is a big deal. Because listen, I mean, like you were mentioning earlier about coaches coming and talking to you and you're like, I don't want to, put my reputation on this guy. Coaches are FBI agents. They're pretty good at doing that 64-point inspection. They actually take it up a notch even more than that because it's an investment, not for the program only, but for their careers and their lives. And, this is a business for them too. And so they just don't want drama. They want guys that are going to come in.
And I want to make sure that the viewers and listeners understand that if if George wants to go to USC, and I don't think George is a good candidate for USC, and I put my name on him and the school's name on him, and then he goes to USC and screws things up, guess what happens the next time I have Ryan who wants to go to USC? USC is not going to return a phone call, a text, a DM, a carrier pigeon. They're going to write my school off forever as long as that staff is there if we send a bad apple. So that's what's real important about that piece, Coach.
Yeah. So I know we only have so much more time, but let's a couple more questions before we land the plane here. But so now let's say a young student athlete has gotten an offer and he's wanting to move on to the next level. What are some things that you could get, like some not questions, but what are some things that you can prepare them for? Or what should they look out for, I guess is probably the best thing, because it's like Mike Tyson said, everybody's heard it. Everybody's got a plan until bam, you take a shot. But all kids think that now I'm on a campus. Oh, by the way, I always tell another little quote I'm going to put on the back of my shirts, Chris, is there are no stars at the next level.
Yeah. It's a good point. Very good point.
So now you're moving into a whole new realm of teammates. They've already been 4 years in these off-season programs. And the biggest jump, in my personal opinion, I've got friends that are in the NFL, they say it's from high school to college, especially if you're at the highest level. Because they don't understand that this is a year-round project. It's a year-round situation, and it's a grind. And for you to keep or to get your spot, then keep your spot, hopefully you get one, is a lot. It's a major undertaking. Now you got to memorize the playbook. Now you got to do your off-season programs. You got to wake up at 6 a.m. You got to do all these different things. Classroom. What would you say are some of the most important things that a young student athlete has to look out for going to a college campus and a program, right?
Yeah, I'd say, earlier we talked about, do they even have my major? What kind of community is this I'm going to live in? I've seen a lot of kids leave California and then come back in January because they never dealt with the snow, for instance. They've never lived in snow. And that's why it's I've had kids. One time I had a kid go to University of Minnesota Crookston. A lot of listeners have probably never heard of Crookston, but that's an NAI. I believe they're still NAIA school. He had never, ever visited there, but he got an offer to go play out there, and he was back in January because of the cold and the snow, to never visit a campus and a community but decide to move there, I think is silly. It might cost, $500 a plane ticket to go out and look at the place, but that's worth that investment, be able to look at the dorms, the cafeteria, So that's a real important aspect of making that decision is, so once you decide on that educational piece, which I think is real big, then it's just what kind of staff is this? What kind of guys are these? Are these transactional coaches, meaning they really don't care about me as a person. They just want me to succeed as a football player. That's what I call a transactional coach, right? It's just the relationship's all about the transaction of football. Sadly, college football, especially the big time stuff, has become more and more like a business where they are more transactional. Or, does this staff care about me as a person? Do they care about me developing as a person? Are they going to have patience to develop me as a person? The only one and way to know that is by going to that school and meeting with other players and talking to players about that coaching staff. I call that, as a principal, I call that an unofficial evaluation. I am always talking in the hallways, out at lunch, in the quad to my students about my teachers. It's very simple. Hey, how do you like Mr. So-and-so? Or a favorite question I have is, who's your favorite teacher? And then they start talking about that teacher. I'm like, why are they your favorite teacher? I learn a ton about our teachers just talking to my kids out in the hallway unofficially. And so prospective student athletes, when you go out on that recruiting trip, Talk to those players in the dorms, in the hallways, not just around the facility, but hey, who's your favorite coach? Why are they your coach? And it's like, oh man, I don't like none of these guys. I'm just here to play football. Well, is that environment you're going to be able to thrive in, or do you need a coaching staff who cares about you as a person? So I think, number one, education. Number two, the coaching staff. Number three is the community and the area. Those are the top three things you really need to look at as a college student athlete.
Yeah. No, and and I always mention to young student athletes, like, listen, so when we say year round, once you get there, so you're talking about a lot of the those external things, but it's like once you get there, mentally you have to understand that there's a period of, you have to recreate yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to recreate who you are and what you're about and what you're going to achieve. And you have to stick to that. And over time, you're going to end up running into people that you'll find out, there's always, I would say, a small percentage of those young student athletes that just clearly they're going to enjoy it way too much. We'll put it that way. And I think it's really important that you get around good teammates, good classmates, whoever, and also try to enjoy it, because I think if there was one thing that I could change going back and doing it again at Utah State, I would try to get a little bit more involved on campus. It's kind of hard, but building relationships outside of football, because all the athletes, it's just well known that they all click together. That's everything. They just are all together, and I think that's because they're they're all like-minded, and I understand that. But there's also some people that you might miss out on having really good relationships that probably will be really long-term relationships down the road, and getting to know your professors on a real tight level. You're talking about, when a teacher, when you go and meet with a kid and say, hey, who's your favorite teacher? I can tell you right now who my favorite professors were. And to this day, I could go back there and they'll definitely go, and we'll go hang out and we'll go do some things together and stuff like that. And so, and those are professional resumes, professional recommendations that can help you down the road. So, I think that's really important. And then just understanding that, you're not going to be like all the others at the same time. You're going to have to be doing all the weights and do all that kind of stuff. And it's a grind, but you got to be open-minded to what you're going into and what your goals are, and find good mentors and so on. And so, last question before we land the plane, my friend, what's your favorite thing? Well, let's do this. Who's got better Mexican food, up there where you're at, or San Diego?
Oh, that ain't even a question, Coach. San Diego, hands down. Hands down. The LA does not know how to cook Mexican food like San Diego. No doubt about it.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing about being an educator?
Just the difference you can make in the lives of kids, that's it, man. Our graduation rate this past year increased by 3%, which at a high school, that's a big jump in 1 year. I'm very proud of that, because we take a very, it's kind of like, Coach, it's like how I used to script plays for Friday night, you go, you scout on the weekend, all Sunday you're spending time watching that defense, preparing your plays, your plans. I bring that mentality to how we run a high school, man. I do. I really do. We've got, our staff meeting our kind of cabinet meeting every Tuesday. We look at our list of seniors, and we have their names up on a board, and we're looking at, what ones aren't coming to school or not engaged. And one of these days, my goal is my high school would have 100% of our seniors graduate. That's a lofty goal. Some of my assistant coaches around here think that's a little too high, unattainable, but that's my goal. I want every one of our kids to graduate. And so when you look at, we increased that by 3% this year. That's 3% more of our kids got a high school diploma. That pumps me up, and it's because we've got a great staff here at my school, and we have the vision to reach out to them, not allow them to fail in a lot of ways, not allow them, give them reasons to sit at home and not engage at school. So when I can build those relationships with kids to get their butts here, that's why I'm in education. That's what I love about it.
And last one, what makes a good teacher / coach?
What we just talked about, you have to have a passion for working with kids. It's going to get boring over years, coaching the same X's and O's for, a lot of times, teaching the same thing over and over and over, year after year after year. So if you're focused just on your subject matter as a teacher or just on your position as a coach, you're not going to really service those kids, because there's going to be days that stuff is boring. That stuff's a grind. But it's that relationship with the kids. That's the key to being a good teacher. You look at, like, I love the HR side of things, and I love hiring people. And sometimes you look at interview questions in districts, it's not even about the most important thing. And so that's how you build relationships with kids and how you manage those relationships. So that's the absolute most important thing, in my opinion.
That's fantastic. And you young student athletes, as well as parents out there, take note, because everything we're throwing at you is exactly how it is, straight from the horse's mouth, for lack of a better term. But just want to say thank you, Coach, for coming on the show. I really appreciate you coming on. And listen, you young student athletes, you can go out and you can find Coach Chris. Is there anything you wanted to plug while you're in?
Yeah, no, if there's anything I can help with, reach me out on Twitter, Chris C. Fore, or you can find me. My website's easy to find online. Just Google my name, send me an email address or an email. You can find my email address on my website, chris@8laces.org. I'm happy to help anybody I can who might need it or just want another piece of advice.
Yeah. And also check us out. Listen, hey, go to YouTube, Walk On Warrior, walk dash on. Make sure you put the dash in there. Walk dash on Warrior. Listen, we're dropping podcasts every single week. We got a ton of content. We got shorts. Go check out my IG as well. Are you on? Did you say Instagram?
No.
No one on Instagram. Go check out my Instagram. Listen, I'll put it down below. Put Coach Chris' information down below. But we got shorts. We got all sorts of good stuff. We got some ebooks getting ready to drop. Got a course that's getting ready to drop. And also going to be doing some in-person seminars, hopefully at a high school near you. And we'll go over everything that we're talking about on here, but in even more detail, because there's a lot of good stuff that you can definitely benefit from. And it will put you in a better position to get that next level opportunity. And listen, hey, I always like to end the podcast this way, but listen, it's not about me or Coach Chris. It's about you guys. We'll see you guys on the next episode.